Clint about so bad.
Nice.
So much. I want to ask him out so much. I want to
Awesome.
start like now.
You know, we have to keep it under 4 hours, though. Just
I
so you know.
know.
4
That's
hours.
so hard.
No, I mean an hour. Yeah, 4. Did I say 4? No.
You said 4 hours.
No, I didn't mean
I
that.
hope not, because I haven't had food. I'm gonna wait to celebrate it.
Oh man.
No.
I had a
We'll
snack.
try and keep it around an hour and a half if we get too excited. But whenever you guys are ready, we will go ahead and start the clap.
Oh,
All right.
That's how Clint's gonna talk.
Yep.
He was
This is how I'm going to talk.
That would be. That's fantastic.
I'm just moving this up and down.
Now, remind me, you clap and then hit record, correct?
I have it in the show notes, so it's going to be 1, 2, 3, press record. 1, 2, 3, clap for marker.
Let me grab those show notes real quick. 1, 2, shoot. 1, 2, 3, press record. 1, 2, 3, clap for marker. Okay, I got it.
Good to go.
I can do it.
Good to go. Pop the collar. There we go. All right, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Absolutely.
1, 2, 3, press record. 1, 2, 3, clap. Perfect. All right. Now we've waited for a couple weeks now and so excited to get right into it. I mean, all three of us have been just like giddy little like schoolboys and girls, just so excited to talk to you, Clint. I can't thank you enough for coming on. And I just want to dive right into it with
Absolutely.
right out of the gate, just starting with a question that Tyler actually came up with. Tyler, you want to ask?
Sure, no problem.
Oh shoot, I forgot.
No?
I think
Tyler, can you hear me?
No.
No. Okay. Well, Clinton.
yes, sir. Yes.
What artists have inspired your work?
That's a loaded question, man. There's a lot of artists that have inspired me. I think the first one that would come to mind would be probably Ralph McQuarrie from the Star Wars series. And I actually, you know what I did? Let me give me a second here. I actually brought a reference sheet up.
Oh, nice.
Of some artwork, if you guys can see this.
Yeah.
So these are examples of some of the artwork that's influenced not only my direction in terms of what to do and pursue art, but also in terms of how to cultivate the skill to create conceptual pieces like this out of my imagination, so to speak. So, you know, when I was young, obviously, and probably same with you guys, Star Wars is a big influence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, in the sci-fi genre, I mean, you see it peppered everywhere. You know, in the video game industry as well. And Ralph McQuarrie did these production paintings, and from what I read, I'm not entirely sure, but I think he got paid like $500 a week to produce 2 of these paintings.
Oh,
and just to imagine, Ralph McQuarrie actually worked for Boeing and a bunch of other aerospace companies prior to doing this. So he had experience in kind of visualizing spaceships and, you know, airplanes and things like that. It's kind of like in the same province of shape and form. You know, you're just kind of exaggerating a few things here and there, or even, you know, completely exaggerating. Depends on what your goal is. But, you know, here's a process here where his pencil sketch. This is what he would probably use as an overlay. So final paintings, they would use acrylics. His choice was acrylics. They wouldn't conceptualize in a final piece. They would probably do like marker comps to study the light. They'll do color breaks to you know, smaller paintings to figure out your color palette. And then when they're ready to go final, they would take this tracing here and transfer it to a large board and then start, you know, really refining it. So to get to this point here to that point, there's a lot of in between that happens. And that process is very similar to what we do now. It's just accelerated at a tremendous speed because of all the digital tools we have. So another one is Joe Johnson. He was a, here's some old marker comps. This was a big thing back then, doing marker comps.
Oh wow,
It
that's
was a cheap,
amazing.
but yeah. So you know how you said you like that brush that I was using. Um,
Mhm.
it's similar to oh, that's not the right brush. Hold on.
For for people listening
Yeah,
right now, just if,
yeah.
if you're not watching the live show,
Oh yeah,
Clinton
yeah. I'll
pulled
keep that
up
in mind.
a
I'll keep that in
spreadsheet
mind.
that has a lot of. It almost looks like a comic strip, and has a lot of concept art pieces from multiple influential artists that he gained
Yes.
inspiration from, and inspired so many other artists, around the in and out of the industry. And the one he has on right now is actually kind of almost like a imagine like a Leonardo da Vinci, that concept art he had for like the war tank, how it was very raw.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So in that fashion, they would still approach it with these types of materials, like much. So in this case, that you don't see a lot of these marker concepts now, like in the conceptual, in this industry.
Hmm.
You have the ability to jump to point A to Z very quickly, depending on your tool set. So the use of 3D um, is a big tool that a lot of people use in the conceptual industry. Painting is part of it still too, but there's just so, and ZBrush is a big tool. Substance Painter, Substance Designer. I can go on,
Hmm.
just name a list of them. Um, and this is just a collection. Let me hop back on this. This is just a collection of different types of artists. So this here is from an artist. His name is Sid Mead, and he's responsible. I would say he's probably one of the godfathers of concept art. Like he designed the Blade Runner series. Uh, there's some
Oh
influence
my
in
gosh.
Logan's Run. Yeah, so like if you can recognize some of this design language in the movies that you see now,
Hmm.
um, it might not be exactly like it, but at least that's the whole point of the concept art, is to try to lead into and try to get close to a design that meets the art director's requirements. Now you can get it exact because with all the 3D tools and the 3D printing, if they're going animatronics or
Hmm.
non-digital. This is from Doug Chang. Doug Chang he was the art director for Episode 1 in Star Wars and Episode 2.
Yep, I'm
And
familiar with him.
yeah, so I think this is like when I recall, what I recall was this was during that time when traditional painting in the conceptual field started really making a shift towards digital, and you can see it a lot in their art books. Like this is all acrylic; these are beautiful paintings, and I do believe they belong in museums. But this process can be achieved a lot faster. Now, well, that's subjective. There's still painters out there that can paint really quick. But these tools are accessible to everybody now, and that's why it's exciting. This is an exciting time for this industry because I think the accessibility into this field is a lot wider, not only in chances but opportunity as well, or in terms of like what kind of concept art do you want to do. Um, so
Now,
yeah, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh no, now on that,
Mhm.
the different kinds of art, what is your favorite theme for art for you
Uh,
personally?
I would honestly say sci-fi. I think that's what kicked it off for me. The Star Wars series, RoboCop. As a kid
Yeah.
watching Transformers. I mean, Transformers was big, and I grew up in the Philippines. Like for the first half of my life, like the majority of my childhood, actually.
Really?
So yeah, so I remember we had the Kung Fu channel that was on 24/7, which was awesome. And then Tuesday nights would be Transformers, so I remember all of
Oh,
that stuff. And so that had a big influence on me. And then just movies from the 80s, like the movies from the 80s. And I'm dating myself here, so I'm fairly old here.
don't feel
Uh,
bad.
so
I'm
so
in the same era, so
in the 80s, you saw a lot of original ideas, a lot of original IPs. Nowadays, you see a lot of rehashes of that. So to me, the 80s and even some of the 90s, that was a golden age of conceptual visual development. To me, anyway. And I could be speaking because it's kind of retro for me, and I grew up with it. But having that sense of awe, seeing something new like that, I don't necessarily get that with a lot of things that I see nowadays. They seem to be kind of tweaks and rehashes of what has been done before, which is natural. And I think maybe during that time they've probably borrowed from previous designs. So what I'm saying is that there's an evolution that happened, but yet some of it's being stagnant, and that's why design's so challenging now. Our audiences are so educated with design because we've seen so much already. Everything in the games that are out there, even in the movies, there's just so much visual design. So it's tough. It can be tough to come up with something original, but that's a challenge that I love personally. Still trying to find something in there, and all that mess, so to speak. So I'll ramble on about that. But so last guy is this guy
sorry.
here.
I didn't mean to sidetrack you.
Craig Mullins. His website is called The Good Brush. I don't know if you guys heard of this guy, but he was doing these digital paintings 20 years ago, and nobody knew what the heck this guy was doing. He was doing concept art that was completely blown everybody away during that time.
Can you blow that piece up a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, dude, like he was knocking stuff like this out in record time. And I remember in all the forums back then, when digital started really taking off, Wacom tablets started becoming accessible. This guy, he was using I think he was using Corel Painter. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Dude, Painter
the amount of
used to
detail
have
in that piece is
insane. But look at his craftsmanship. When I zoom in, you got that grid there. You can see the simplicity, the masterful stroke. It's one stroke implying multiple things versus somebody going in there and detailing that little rivet or detailing that. His ability to suggest things is so masterful. And he was translating that from old traditional methods into this world. And I remember, and still to this day, I mean, industry vets will tell you, like, this guy pioneered a lot. And I'm being very modest with the selections. If you go to his site, it will completely blow you away.
The style of that one piece of his is like almost like very like Renaissance type.
Yes.
Previous era,
like
it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
You see the craftsmanship in his brushwork. Yeah,
from the brushes.
Yeah. So, but here's another one I kind of mixed them up. But yeah, if you get a chance, and what I'll do is I'll try to provide those links for you guys so you guys can check it out. There's tons of great artists out there.
Oh yeah, we'll put them in the show notes for the episode too, in case anybody wants to look into any of these artists that you've named and showed us. Here that you've gained inspiration from. That is an iconic scene from Star Wars right there.
And it's crazy how well it translated. So you can imagine seeing this painting and then seeing it on screen. Back then, to have it almost one for one is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So that's the job of a concept artist, to really guide. And this would be called, I would consider this a key shot illustration, where the conceptual side has been developed already. The marker comps, the creature, things have been approved. Now we need to stage it. And that's where you would get into illustration, so to speak.
Yeah. Just so people know, the image that we're looking at right now is from the Star Wars series, the original 3, when Luke Skywalker got put into a pit and they opened a gate and a giant like Golgoroth type monster comes out, and shortly after Luke gets his lightsaber and takes the thing down like a badass that he is. But just the concept art, looking at this piece, it's just amazingly detailed, and I can't believe that did transfer that well to the actual movies. Yeah.
So I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I mean, there's tons of other artists, like even modern, I would say modern folks that are still in the industry, like Fang Zhu, Ryan Church, Scott Robinson. I can't even believe I forgot about Scott Robinson. Scott Robinson, when I started following his work and I bought it was like 15 years ago, close to 20 years ago. I couldn't afford to go to one of the big name art schools out there. And, the way education is distributed now, it's a lot more accessible as well. But back then, and not to get too caught up, going to art school was very difficult because of cost and logistics and just all kinds of things. So when Gnomon started coming out, that gave us an avenue to try to peek into this process. And Scott Robinson, man, he released the Fundamentals of Perspective. Those 4 DVDs literally changed me as an artist completely. Like after that whole session, when I understood how perspective worked, it literally opened up all these doors. All my imagination just took off, and the confidence to realize these images was a lot stronger because I understood how to plot these things, and it was that aha moment for me, literally. But anyways, not to get too caught up, I can talk about that stuff all day.
No,
But
it's
yeah,
really exciting, and
yeah,
I mean,
to-
seeing
to-
where you
yeah.
drew a lot of inspiration
yeah,
is just incredible. And having, I don't think I've ever seen anybody have this amount of just examples all set ready to go. I mean, this is really a treat.
oh yeah, I had a few.
It's a
It wasn't
beautiful
too much.
board.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
had them
it's-
saved for like screensavers and references before, didn't you? It was
No,
just a
you
quick
just-
copy and paste right to this sheet, wasn't
that's just from Google to
it?
Photoshop.
From Google to Photoshop.
Yeah, literally. I just started. There's a few others that I would like to have done it, but it's just a matter of time.
Right.
But I can provide those links later. We can always.
Yeah, for sure.
follow
We'll
up on
definitely
that stuff.
include those. That would be great to have those because I'm going to
I
look
want to
into
revisit all of that.
exactly. Same here. We do have some more questions for you, and we want to keep rolling with it.
Yeah.
The second one is, do you recommend certain key map shortcuts when doing concept work?
I do. And again, it depends on where you're using. With me, Photoshop being my main tool, hotkeys are essential for me because I don't use the those side buttons on Wacom tablets and that
Yeah.
scroll wheel. I don't use any of that stuff, only because I feel that my hand is ergonomically better on a keyboard versus kind of using my thumb. And the speed is just a lot quicker for me, I guess, almost like playing a piano. And again, that's just because I've done it for years. Now, so to answer your question, depending on what you're using, yes, I do recommend using hotkeys. And there are a few hotkeys that I use that I will make available to you guys. I can just save my keys out, and I'll provide like a keyboard map of what these buttons do. So, but yeah, there are things that ergonomic, and again, it's all about ergonomics for me. I've been doing this for a long time, so I have some injuries that I got to deal with, shoulder injuries. That's why I don't use Cintiqs anymore. I used a Cintiq for 2 years, and that tore my shoulder up, man. It literally did. So I don't know if my posture was off or whatever. And everybody's different, but my choice, tool of choice, would just be a regular Wacom tablet. I use a medium Intuos. I think it's an Intuos 4 or 5. And the reason why is that for me, okay, let me give you an example. I see the challenges of using a Wacom tablet because what happens is that, let's say your monitor, is a lot bigger than your tablet, which is most of the case, right? They're not one for one,
Right.
right? So when you make a quarter sketch there, it's going to come out like an inch there. That visual disconnect is very difficult to deal with sometimes.
Yeah.
And that does take practice. So a lot of people say, I'd rather sketch on a Cintiq because literally it is one for one. You are drawing on the screen, whether it be a Cintiq or an iPad. The advantage with using this, though, is that if you do get used to understanding those ratios in that prediction, in a sense, your strokes are a lot shorter than doing it one for one. In theory, you can be faster doing that, if that makes sense. Because I am not, taking my arm and doing these long strokes. I'm only just doing small, a small stroke here. And the time, it might be milliseconds, but that stuff adds up. If you're doing thousands of strokes, sometimes tens of thousands of strokes.
Have
Hundreds
you
of thousands.
Have you used precision mode?
I have. In terms of like how it adjusts your curves. Is that what you're saying?
No, it'll sort of make the screen size on the Intuos even smaller so that, no, wait. You tell, shoot, how does it work? I
Are you
think
talking about it being proportion? Like, there's a proportion option?
there's an option so that you can only use, so that let's say you are using a medium tablet and your
Yes.
screen is big, right?
Yes.
You can make it so that
I see. So I see what you mean.
It'll
Yeah,
look
yeah.
small on the screen, so
Yeah.
you're
So,
sort of zoomed in
yeah.
in a sense.
Yeah. So are you talking about where you can allocate space on your screen to match your tablet? Is that what you're saying?
It's more of a zoom in. It's actually a shortcut key on the
Oh,
Wacom, so maybe you
okay.
haven't explored it yet, but
I haven't tried
it'll
that.
make
Yeah.
it faster. I think it'll actually do exactly what you're saying to a more extreme level. Just
Hmm.
FYI.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. We'll try that out.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good plan. But yeah, so that's my setup, and that's my everybody's got a different one.
Yeah.
Um,
Of course.
but yeah, to answer your question, which was, do I prefer Wacom tablets versus something else, or am I off base here?
That is actually a question, so you can
Yes.
for sure ask that.
Yeah,
Answer
well,
that.
the original
I
question
want to
jumping
know.
was,
questions here?
I want to know. Please answer.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joe.
No, you're fine. We trailed off. It's okay.
Uh,
I feel like this episode is going to spiral real quickly on a lot of subjects because they all kind of lead into
You
one
know what?
another.
That's
They
it.
do. They do.
A lot
So
of
we
them
should just
blend
let it
together.
happen.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I'm tracking too. I think I got some of the questions up here, so maybe I can help with that, I guess, but I don't
So
know.
we were kind of talking about your key map shortcuts.
Yes.
And that's kind of what led to you saying you prefer doing it with a Wacom
Mhm.
because it gives you access to the keyboard. Are there certain shortcuts that you utilize the most
Yes.
for your style besides Control Z?
Oh, absolutely. So on my keyboard, just do a quick map. Here's my space bar, Alt blah, and then we got Shift. So all my buttons are within hand's reach. I'm not even moving my shoulder. It's just fingers, So you got Z,
Right.
X, and C, and that's it. So Z is my zoom tool. So when I hit Z, I can scrub I can scrub my tablet back and forth.
nice.
Right before that, or right after that, is X, which I have my brush. I don't know, my ratios there. So I can hop, if I'm zooming in, I just press Z to hop right back into my brush. If I need to zoom out, brush, zoom in, brush. See? All right next to each other. So, and then the last one is C. Now, C is unique because it's unique to my situation because, again, exercising minimal movements. C allows me to rotate on the fly so that my elbow is always on a pivot. It's always on its best pivot. So if I need to do curves, I just rotate, much like you would spin a piece of paper. See?
Right.
So,
Oh yeah, I could
and
see the
holding down Shift
benefits
will-
of
yeah.
those hotkeys. Just those three at the bottom
Yeah.
of the keyboard,
Um,
where you kind of keep your elbow in, kind of
Mhm.
relax, and you're not
Yes.
reaching for it.
Right. So, and then Alt, when I hold down Alt, I assign my Wacom button. So when I scrub, I don't know if you can see this, but I can increase the size of my brush. Can you see the circle?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can do that on the fly. I can do, hold that down and scrub it. I can get it down small, or get it down big, so you can quickly block in things, and then if you want to start drilling in with a smaller pen, you can do that conceptually very quickly. Or if you're doing conceptual art, you can do this stuff very quickly. Or just illustration or whatever, however you approach your pieces.
Mhm.
Oops,
Oh, we lost Ruby.
you got to disconnect. So those are the main ones, and then there's a few others like let's say, let me just get a shape going there. I have hotkeys for warps and distorts. So F1 would be to distort if I need to do something in perspective really quick. And then F2 would be my warp if I need to really wrap something around or try to create some organic, wrap something that's organic.
Mm-hmm.
or create an organic shape, you know. So there's a few of them, but these are the main ones. I probably use about 80 or 90%. Z, X, and C. Oh, I'm sorry, space.
They
When I
can't
hold down
forget the
space, yeah,
space. I
yeah,
mean,
you got,
that's
you know,
like the
that's how
most
you
important
can.
button on a keyboard.
But yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
So what does space do for you?
When I hold down space, it turns into the pan bar. So let's say if I'm zoomed in,
Hmm.
um, I'm always executing in this kind of area. So, you know,
Oh, okay.
panning, you see,
Yeah.
you know, and again, it just helps out. Again, and it all depends on who you are. I always think about ergonomics because being in pain doing this type of stuff really sucks. So take care of yourselves. You know, don't if you're getting into this and you're take learn to take breaks. That's the best thing I can. And I'm sure you guys know that stuff. But you know, I did it.
That's good advice. I mean, it
Yeah,
really is.
Yeah.
You got to
yeah,
keep
yeah,
ergonomics in check because, like you said before, you were using a certain model tablet that you were drawing on, and it was
right.
just ripping your shoulder apart. Just
Yeah,
having it that angle, and having it this way, and
yeah.
using shortcuts and key mapping out, taking the time to put into it will actually benefit
Mm.
you in the long run and make it more comfortable.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, it's with Procreate now and iPads. I mean, people are drawing on screens a lot more than they ever have. And what's cool about it is that you can lay on your couch and do that stuff. So you know, you can get really comfortable uh, doing that stuff. So ergonomically, that's why I love Procreate. Procreate is my relax tool. Like when I'm winding down at night and I just watching some shows or whatever, and you know, and I just want to doodle something, Procreate's great for that stuff, and other things too, obviously. Um, I'm starting to fold it in a lot more into my process in terms of capturing ideas, taking notes. Like it's great for taking notes. Um, and you know, a lot of it has to do with research. You know, you're doing a lot of preliminaries in terms of what I do. You're always researching.
Now, a little
And
bit of background.
sure,
I know a lot of people, know of you and have seen your work, your concept designs. I mean, you do some insanely amazing designs. I mean, the environment building that you do, you posted one just last week that somebody gave you of just like a rock formation or a building
oh
formation
yes,
on a
yes,
hill, and you
yes,
created this jaw-dropping design of an environment and just really took it to the
yeah.
thousandth of levels. But what's a little bit of background on you, Clinton? Like, what do you do during the day versus the concept design that you do like at night and in your spare time?
I do concept work for an engineering company here in town.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the stuff that I do for them is really grounded to reality. I mean, although some of it can be out there, um, which
Like
you know is
like the
go ahead.
one artist that you brought up
Yeah,
earlier who worked for Boeing.
Ralph McQuarrie. Yeah, so like
Right.
you know he might have worked. He worked for an aerospace company, and he's probably worked on programs that were sensitive, and you know they might push the imagination a little bit, and so that's definitely a different environment. It's versus doing something in the entertainment industry. But I would say that a lot of those processes are the same in terms of how they build the
Mm-hmm.
visuals. Um, and a lot of companies now are starting to have in-house more graphics capabilities, more visualization capabilities, just depending on the company, obviously. But you know, with rapid prototyping and with 3D printing and VR, there's just a lot of opportunity for somebody with visualization skills to enter a market that isn't necessarily in the entertainment industry. That to me, and again, it's all depends on what you find interested in,
Mm-hmm.
what you have interest in. But that stuff is interesting to me, and I can see how you can apply grounded concepts and expand on them to make you know things that are a little bit more out there. And I think what helps is understanding how things work from a real perspective, because visually, if you're going to create concepts, that are, for movies and games, things still have to make sense visually. Like they have to be grounded on something. Like if you made a gelatin armor, that probably wouldn't make sense, right? Like you would. Well, it depends on the chemical makeup, I guess. You could push that, but from a visual perspective, creating an armor set, you would think of hard materials, things that are very rigid. So those are the things that that you look for. So I'm losing track here, actually.
No,
So in
you're
terms of
fine.
like, yeah, I'm rambling. But back to your point, I'm hopping here. Back to that illustration that you were talking about,
Mhm.
with the little rock formation. That was actually a study in a pipeline that I'm hoping to fold in more into my process, and that is utilizing game engines. So a lot of concept
Ooh.
you will see like in a concept in a studio, in a game studio. I mean, 3D assets are available already. Depending on what you're building, they can start constructing things in a 3D environment. Now, in the past, they probably wouldn't get to that point until the concept art is done. You need some direction because that fluidness wasn't there. Now it's there, and the accessibility to assets are there. And as we move forward in game development, I think the roles are going to be changing. Concept art is going to be is going to have different requirements other than just having the ability to draw something. It's going to require the understanding of 3D programs because you have to fit into their pipeline. And to me, in my opinion, there's no avoiding that. Like as everything starts to become 3D and things are becoming more automated, you just have to fold that tool set into, again, it all depends. It all depends on what you're trying to do with your art. If you want to get into the game industry, or if you want to try it in other economies, like if you want to sell your art, make prints and sell, that is a lucrative economy. That is an amazing economy to get into. So, that is another path that you can travel down. But yeah, again, I'm rambling here. It's just an exciting time to be in this industry. Like I said earlier, just a lot of opportunities, and but yeah, that's there's a lot of opportunities out there. And it doesn't have to be in video games. It doesn't have to be in movies. It can be in other industries. If you want to be a product designer, there's opportunities for that too. Transportation design, all kinds of cool stuff.
Right. I mean, it's a huge area and like almost market. I mean, it's so vast. Like you said, you can do anything. I mean, there's
Right.
design areas for literally everything.
Right.
One thing I wanted to skip one question real quick and just get to this one.
Sure.
As a new artist, what should you focus on first? Tone and lighting, or anatomy and structure of objects, would you suggest?
That's a good question. As a new artist, I'd probably go back up before that, actually, and as an artist, try to figure out what kind of artist you want to be. Because if you want to be an environment artist, anatomy is probably not going to, be as important to you as understanding the fundamentals of perspective. So I guess figuring that part out, if you wanted to be a character designer, and I think all of those disciplines that you talked about are going to have to be exercised at some point. But as an artist, I think what's really important is what kind of art do you want to do? And so having a goal to work for a studio will ultimately drive you in a different direction in training. So that might include different types of disciplines. You might have to learn lighting before anything else, or there's jobs out there for just lighters. People who are good at lighting, people who are good at modeling. They have individual. That's why those big AAA companies, man, they hire people that do that one thing unbelievably well. And they have an army of people like that doing different things. That's why they're able to push these amazing things out. Not saying that they couldn't do multiple disciplines, but they're usually hired to do one or a couple other things, depending on their versatility.
Right.
But yeah,
So-
it's go ahead.
Let's say this: as a concept artist, you're a new artist and you want to become like a concept environment artist, right?
Right.
Would you say it's better to learn perspective and start in black and white, or just jump straight into color with stuff?
Oh, that's a good question. What helped me was breaking those disciplines down, because doing black and white stuff and color stuff are two total different beasts to try to tame. So in one challenge, doing black and white, you are studying value. You're trying to understand how darks and lights play within a scene, within a shot. And it's your job to stage that shot with light and dark. So, that can be challenging as well. Now, when you throw color in, it gets really complicated, because now your value has more layers to it. Now, in the past, and I'm learning this myself, that in shadows, there is tons of color that goes on in shadows. It's not necessarily just a darker tone. Like, let's say if this was a brown mountain, and this would just be a simple, this would be just a darker brown. That's not entirely true. A lot of things influence what this color is going to be. Distance would. So you might have atmospheric influence. That could be a blue. That can be a purple. That can be, have hues of red. And then when the lights hit, that could be another color too. So environment has influence on how your value is displayed, as well as the color or the hue within that area. So, for example, if we were to study just a value study for environments, as you saw earlier, I just made a big mess, right? Like I started scribbling. I wasn't even looking at the screen. And sometimes I do that exercise because I need to break out of my sensibilities. I need to start to see things that I'm not used to seeing. So I started seeing a ridge line, so I started popping that out. And from that point, I can see something forming there. And usually at this point, I would establish my perspective. So I say, okay, I want my horizon there, and you're going to have a convergence point here. And in the past, I would try to decide how many points of perspective I want. So I'd be like, I want a 2-point perspective, so I'll have one up here. So things are going to start, converging from that point. But as I started to do it more, I just I go along with it and sometimes make up different points. But for example, what I'm talking about value is that if you're doing value studies, things obviously in the foreground are going to have more value, So you have like this background here, and you have this midground, and then you'll have foreground elements. So I break that up into 3. My dark is here, and then my midtone's here, and then my lightest value is back here. I'll zoom back, right, and look at it, and I won't touch that. I will not touch the values. What I'll do is I'll pull in, and whatever value is given to me here, I'm going to work with. Because once I start introducing some of these values, I'm going to throw that off. Like you have to trust the values. So I start to see light, this value here might be a lighter tone of this. I have a ridge line here. So, I'm just pushing and pulling value, but I'm not introducing anything from here. I'm just staying within this realm here, this area. All right. So once I'm okay with that, that looks pretty good. I'm going to start, messing around with my midtones. So I'm going to establish that, maybe create some more structures, and again, I'm not going to mess with values. I'm not going to introduce this dark here. Everything that lives in this area stays in this area, unless otherwise, unless you're making something up. So here's my third layer, which would be all my dark values. So anything that lives in this area is going to share these values. Now, what's interesting about these foreground elements here is that they will share, in some cases, some of these values. So those highlights might be the value from back here. They start to borrow from so these guys up front, they get everything from back there up to here, depending on how you're lighting your scene. Like if you needed to light it, you would actually reference these things. You would select from that palette. So, and then again, when I was talking about in shadows, there's not complete darkness. There's a lot of color dancing in there. And again, I'm doing a black and white, but there's also texture in there. So I will sample the middle and just kind of like, that might be too much, but start to add some life in there, because shadows, they shouldn't just be blocks. Well, I don't want to say that. Depends on what you want to do and what your goal is. But to inject more fidelity into your piece, you have to address those things. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's how I would approach environment design. And you know what? A lot of these things would apply into an indoor environment too. What's interesting about indoor environments, you got a lot of artificial light. So man, you can play around with some cool stuff. Like if you wanted to highlight that little mountain right there, you know, you might have this light coming here. And you not saying you couldn't do that in you know, in an outdoor environment.
Mhm.
You know, I do that all the time when I'm drawing characters. Like, you know, your stick salesman. You see all these guys with the, you know, with poles and stuff like that in fantasy in concept art. Um, you know, sometimes I'll have like a little bit of artificial light, or you know, I'll make up a reason. You know, like let's say that, you know, there's light hitting, you know, hitting this specifically, busting through the clouds. Well, because of that, there's going to be reflective light bouncing from that rock. You know, so I can inject more detail into that character. So I know I rambled on about a little bit, but breaking things down into three value sets, I think, would be very helpful to kind of study
Yeah.
environment design, and not only that, character design as well. I think you can, if you can achieve a lot of enough fidelity to communicate your idea with just minimal value, I think you're in a good place because detail can always be put in. Um, so oftentimes the simplest designs I can appreciate because I know there was a lot of designs that they went through to get to that point of simplicity, that to where it works like that. Um, and that can be applied to a lot of things like spaceship designs. Like you see a lot of simple designs, but there's some beauty to that. You know, like the Starship Enterprise, it's an iconic shape. The Death Star is an iconic shape. It's simple in nature. It's just a big triangle, right? But the way it's portrayed and the little subtleties, what they do here and there, I'm sure that there was a lot of design iteration that went into something like that before they came to that conclusion.
That reminds me, there was a technique, or you could do it as an exercise.
Mhm.
For creating character design was the teacher would have us create just silhouettes of character, just add
Yes,
stuff
yes,
to it, and then go
yes,
into detailing from there. And you can just, as
yes,
long as the silhouette looks interesting, you can come up
absolutely.
with a fascinating design.
Absolutely, and you're exactly right. You know, if your silhouette reads at a very small size, you know,
Yes.
you're in a good place too because you got the main form out of the way. So you know this guy, like this little dude, he's probably kind of a heavy, tough kind of person just because of his shapes. And you know, when you start to use shapes to,
Broad shoulders.
you know, broad shoulders and things like that versus, you know, somebody who's really frail. To see, yeah, to your point, silhouettes are very powerful, and there's no reason that you couldn't apply that to environment design or product design as well. Those types of philosophies can be adopted in a lot of things. Um, so yeah, it's fun stuff, man. I mean, there's so much you can go over because it's really exciting, really exciting stuff, especially with the new tools coming out.
New
Um,
tools.
yeah, it's just you know, the integration of Substance Designer into Photoshop. That's gonna, you know, I don't know how they're gonna handle that, but in terms of like that capability, bringing in 3D models and be able to apply really high fidelity materials within Photoshop. It's essentially trying to address having a third party app. So if you do 3D work, you do your, you know, your sculpts, and I don't think you can do that stuff in Photoshop yet. But in terms of texturing, let's say that you're a concept artist and you just got a bunch of models off of like Google SketchUp, their library, right? And a lot of them aren't detailed. Maybe a lot of them just have, you know, a generic shader on there. You bring that in Photoshop, and you're able to apply these textures,
Compositing.
yeah, these, you know, these materials very quickly, and you can adjust them. But I don't know how that's going to play out, you know. And then also again with ZBrush and KeyShot and all these other tools, it's just there's going to be an acceleration of design language. There's so much that we're able to create very quickly.
Well,
Currently, for the graphic designers, they have Adobe Dimensions, which lets you create super quick mockups.
Oh,
You could
nice.
just slap a logo right onto a model, which is available through their library,
Hmm.
uh, and just quickly make something look realistic, like a real product. And
Right.
then they have a beta for another software called Fuse, which lets you sort of generate your own humanoid character,
I
and you
see.
can bring that into Photoshop and composite once again. So these tools are definitely becoming a thing.
Yeah, and again, to my surprise, it's the ability to draw something from scratch isn't necessarily isn't a necessarily a requirement anymore. What they're paying you to do is to solve design problems, and you use the tools that you can. Short of plagiarizing anybody, obviously, but
Right.
you gotta use these tools to kind of help you visualize your ideas, or at least your client's ideas. And that's it's a very exhilarating process. It really is.
Yeah, that's also something that we touched on in the last episode with Brian Monkis.
A fantastic artist too,
He
man.
is. He's so talented, but in the learning process, along the lines of, plagiarizing, but just copying somebody else's work for your own benefits to learn
Oh
how
yeah,
to do
yes,
certain things can
absolutely. Yeah,
help you
yes,
down the road farther.
yes.
You know what? I love referencing because every time I think of that now, I just think of, a little boy with Ninja Turtles laying on the linoleum floor drawing,
That
Yeah.
was
sketching his
great.
buddies. That was fantastic. But yeah, it's definitely something that, doing somebody else's work, not using it commercially or anything, but
Oh
will
yeah, yeah.
copying it down will help you gain the techniques down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, we all have to start somewhere, right? We all
Right.
start from observation, and yeah, to his point, that is exactly correct. I mean, looking at what's worked before and studying that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is actually something I would encourage to do, because by understanding those things, you understand what has worked and what still is working, and then over time, you expand on that.
Right.
Start to find yourself within these techniques.
Now,
You're Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just gonna say. Now with, I was just gonna continue us down the road with
Mhm.
talking about Procreate and Photoshop
Mhm.
and Cintiq. Uh, One of the questions wanted to ask, we kind of built a topic around this, but Procreate and Photoshop.
Mhm.
Uh, to you personally, does one feel better than the other? And
Uh,
like, what are some pros and cons of each?
Procreate. It's hard for me to really gauge Procreate because I haven't given it a fair shake yet. If I were to use Procreate just as long as I've had with Photoshop, I can probably give a better answer. But in terms of what I've seen now and what I've experienced now, like I said, Procreate has folded itself into my pipeline, and it is a great tool. I have it with me all the time. So it's an amazing tool because it has a great camera on it. If you need to take some pictures, for studying and for referencing, um, the battery lasts a long time. The sketching on there. To answer your question in terms of how it feels, there's nothing out there that compares to it. Not even on the Cintiq. Well, it depends on who you talk to, but to me, uh, the iPad has nailed that feel, to where that the subtlety of that pencil feels good. And Procreate has somehow captured that too into their program. Um, and what really got me hooked this year was their updates for Smart Shapes. And I don't know if you guys have used
Oh,
Smart Shapes is a game changer, man. Like the ability to create uh, polygonal shapes, geometric shapes with editable vector points, like on the fly, is a big deal for me anyway.
right.
And then creating ellipses with editable vector points as well is huge, especially in industrial design. When you're using a lot of those tools to help visualize products, uh, it's a great tool. So if I'm sitting in a meeting, not only can I take notes, but I can get to a pretty quick concept while I'm there, and we can answer a lot of questions right up front. It saves me a lot of time, having the ability to visualize very quickly. So you get all the bad ideas out quickly too. That happens, and that's important as well because You know, we always, in terms of design, we'll always leverage our sensibilities, and sometimes those things don't work for they don't work for that design solution. So the ability to sketch, you know, to produce visuals as quickly as possible, you can fish out the bad ones very quickly. And Procreate certainly helps me with that. And I use it in conjunction with Photoshop, depending on how far I'm taking a piece. If I'm designing something and I'm sketching something, then when I get into production mode, I have to go back into Photoshop. You know, if I'm starting to do a lot more 3D generation of that design, trying to push the fidelity further, I have to unwrap UVs, things like that. So Photoshop's really good for that stuff. But who's to say? You know, you never know if Procreate will come up with something. You know, they might have a three, and they might. What I think they should, what they're probably going to do eventually is they're going to have some sort of in program 3D generator. And when they do that, that's gonna. Well, you know, I'm assuming that they're doing it, but I would love to see that. I think that would be fantastic.
Never know.
Yeah, that would
Never
be
know. They
fantastic.
could be working on that right now. It could be
Yeah.
an update for this spring or something.
Who knows, man? Who knows? You know, so. But they've been doing. I mean, it's so cheap, dude. It's like $10, and these updates that they're releasing are ridiculous, man.
And that's on
think
Procreate.
Procreate, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. So I think it's a great tool to fold into to my process.
Right. I
So-
see a lot more artists nowadays migrating over to Procreate. I see
Yeah.
a lot more I see it as a tool along with, and, you know, as you said, in conjunction with Photoshop or other digital formats and programs.
Mhm.
Procreate is helping bring a lot of concept art and designs and other artwork, fan art, to another level with what you can do within it. in a
Right, right.
piece. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's a phenomenal program. And there's some phenomenal work coming out of that, you know, so kudos to them.
I have a question from chat.
Sure.
Someone was asking, who inspired you to draw?
Right off the bat, I would say it wasn't anybody famous. It was my family members.
Oh,
Growing up in the Philippines, you know, we didn't have a lot, so we moved a lot, and we used to spend our summer. At least I used to spend my summers down in the province, down in the southern islands, and there's nothing really to do other than play on the beach, which was awesome, you know. But other than that, a lot of my cousins were fantastic craftsmen. You know, they would either be building something, carving something, or illustrating something, you know, because those were cheap forms of entertainment. And so I think I was inspired by that. And then also being in that environment, it was just a beautiful country. You know, you saw a lot of nature, you saw a lot of creatures. I remember going to the province when I was a kid, and we lived in huts. That's how it was. And it's a little bit different now. But when I went down to the province, there was no electricity. It's a fishing village, and it's on a very isolated island. So you would catch your food every day or harvest your food from the, you know, fruit trees or whatever, or from the market if you had money. But I remember waking up early in the morning with my family, and we'd go out to the low tide. The low tide would be out, and we'd be collecting all of these things that we'd be eating all day, like clams and mussels and crazy looking crabs and octopuses. So as a kid, man, I'm like, this is fantastic, you know. So and then with the movies that I'm seeing, it's like it's just fueling my imagination, and then being in an environment of creatives. You just start drawing naturally. I think when you're a kid, I think every kid likes to draw, you know, like, and then over time, for some reason, you know, they stop doing it. But kids love to create things, you know, and I haven't lost that sense of wonder. I haven't lost that, you know, that desire to pursue being creative, you know. That's just always been with me. And I think a lot of that, again, to answer your question, I'm rambling here, but yeah, I think the first people that really influenced me is my family. They're just a bunch of fishermen and craftsmen, and that's I'm probably a direct product of that, an evolution of that, I would say.
That's fantastic.
yeah, I love the answer.
There's nothing like having a supportive family and a family that, you know, inspires you to create as you see them creating something. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, what you said about just children, just inherently just like to create and draw. I'll never forget. And you made me, I'm going to share this, and it's not anything spectacular, but my grandmother, for years, I used to love to draw and everything. And I got into an accident. I can't really hold a pen anymore in my dominant hand.
Oh man.
And for the longest time, even after I think I was my first year of college, and I was in art college, and my grandmother, every time I see her, she would have a stack of cardboard, like the cardboard you'd get from like buying t-shirts. And when I was a little kid, she used to like save all these for me to draw on. And she would have like crayons and everything else. And she always, for some reason, that always just warmed my heart, that she believed in me drawing and creating things and doing artwork, that she, even after all those years, she still would collect them and then give them to me the next time she saw me. She'd just
That's
slide
awesome.
them to me like, "Oh, Joey, I got something for you." Here. And she'd just hand me a pile. "There you go. Draw me something." And I just love you, Grandma.
That's
That's
awesome.
so
That's
sweet.
cool.
Yeah. It wasn't the Philippines, but
Yeah, man. And there's just a lot of. It's a very superstitious culture too, man. So I was always fueled by crazy stories too, and so it was just
I
it was a
can
perfect
imagine.
environment. Perfect environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I have I collect a lot of hand carved wooden masks. If you go up in my hallway upstairs, it's just filled with hand carved masks from my favorite one is from the Philippines. It's a 3.5 foot tall hand carved mask that each one of them symbolizes a certain thing, and that one wards off evil or bad spirits.
Oh,
And
nice.
it's the culture in the Philippines is so superstitious and has so much just inside its own culture. It's just an
Yeah,
incredible culture. I can't imagine growing up there.
yeah. It's yeah, I'm very, very grateful to be honest with you.
I'll take
It's
I'll take a picture of the hallway and I'll send it
Yes,
to you.
please.
Yeah, I
awesome.
got some
Post
really
it
nice
too
ones
in
from
the
the
episode.
Northwest Pacific uh, tribes out there.
Mm,
Those ones they're smaller ones, but my gosh, just the amount of detail that they put in.
yeah, it's a country full of crafts. I mean, I wouldn't say just that country. There's talented people everywhere, man.
Oh
It's
yeah, absolutely.
it's pretty phenomenal. Um, yeah, and with social media and how we communicate these days, you're starting to see a lot more of that talent. There's just more opportunities for exposure.
Yeah, that's a different topic later on. We'll touch more on that.
Mhm.
There was another chat before we get rolling into our main body of everything.
Sure.
I know we're drilling you with questions for the
No,
last
no,
hour,
it's all good,
but
man. Yeah, no
uh,
worries.
there was one more. We'll touch on another question real quick. Is it always better to start out in grayscale or apply? Oh no, we just did that one. I'll edit
Yeah,
that out.
So sometimes, yeah, it all depends, man.
uh,
Go ahead.
yeah, no. Was there ever a time where you feel drained of creativity, unmotivated to
Oh
continue?
yes, dude,
And
that is a yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
it was, I think everybody gets hit by that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What's a remedy for you to help remotivate you to get
Um,
creating again?
Definitely just getting out of the house. That's a big part of it. Going outdoors, watching movies, playing games too, man. I think playing games is fun. It's a different type of engagement, creative engagement. I think um, you're still fueling your imagination, but I would say step away from art just for a little bit. If it is burning you out, um, I think that's the easiest answer. But don't stay away too long. If your goal is to improve, staying away too long can be counterproductive. You might end up staying away way too long. And a lot about this stuff is about momentum. Learning one thing and applying it and you know, and then continuously building off that. Like anything, you know, you play the piano, you learn how to do that for a bit, which is, I mean, obviously easier said than done, but you know, if you don't practice it, you're just gonna get rusty at it. And but
Right.
yeah, to address burnout, man, I would just say just get away from it for a little bit. Uh, but you know, everybody's different. Everybody's different.
Do you ever get burnt out on a particular piece and just completely scrap it and move on?
Dude, oh man, part of my job is to scrap pieces, uh, which it kind of sucks to say. Like doing concept art, you almost have to detach yourself emotionally from the work, and the journey is what's valuable to me, you know, and then the art's the byproduct. So if somebody asks for iterations or changes and things like that, I'm not attached to it. You know, it's just another opportunity to exercise certain things. But yeah, to answer your question, man, I've discarded pieces um, that I've worked on for hours. You know, it's like, you know what? I'm just polishing a cannonball here. You know, I'm not. This is not going to do anything. So I would, but a lot of time, you know, obviously, it's probably it might not be the right design for that moment. You know, you put it away and revisit it some other time. You might see something new in it. Um, but yeah, man, to answer your question, I do that quite a bit. I think that's what lends. That's why I try to do pieces so fast. I think I get bored very easily with it. Um, so the you know illustrating stuff very quickly uh, is very good for me. You know, so I don't get bored with it. Um, but yeah, man, I think everybody goes through that.
Very cool. All right. So, as a concept artist, how much research do you do before you start like an actual project?
Oh man, you should spend like your first if you are working on a project and you're designed with the you know a bunch of this you're tasked with a bunch of designs. The first rule is to understand your target, understand what you're doing, or what you're trying to visualize. So I would spend the whole day, like literally, like my first day. If they gave me a week, for example, my first whole day would be a full working day, just referencing, just trying to study. And that's a luxury. A full week is definitely a luxury, but trying to study what that subject matter is, understand what it looks like, and then start the process of thumbnailing. You know, start doing smaller illustrations. You know, trying to fuse ideas, trying to come up with something new, and then it's just a process of iteration and refinement after that. I know I make it sound so simple, but there's a lot of steps involved. But to answer your question, yeah, research is a big part of it. And you know, I might spend more than just a day. It could be a full day, and then breaks of research in between, depending on you know if I get stuck or not. You know, but yeah,
Gotcha.
research is important, man. It's you
So
gotta
when you're
fill your
doing research, you're just pulling in a bunch of references and stuff, or do you also look into like history of
Oh
something?
yes, absolutely. I think history is a very important. Matter of fact, on there was a recent project where I had to study up on the Spanish American War and how that led to actually the Filipino American War, which I didn't really know about. And so you know, I was tasked to illustrate a certain part of that scenario, but I couldn't help but not get sucked into the story. It helped me breathe more life into something that probably wasn't there. You know, so you know, understanding the condition of some of the soldiers, understanding uh, the condition of the ship, what's the morale of the people there. Those types of things really help craft a story because you can inject those subtleties into, you know, depending on what you're doing, you know, obviously. But you know, if you have people or components to express emotion, uh, those parts of the story, the beefier the story is, it's going to definitely fuel you uh, and definitely give you more a visual library to play with, so to speak.
Gotcha. So we kind of asked this question with Brian because
Mhm.
me, Ruby, and Joe were all kind of talking about it, but we've noticed when we were researching that we end up running into some super random fun fact that had nothing to do with what we were researching. We call it like rabbit holing, basically.
I love
Has that
this
ever
one.
happened to you? Do you have any interesting fun fact that
Rabbit
you learned
hole.
from?
Oh,
I love how you
Rabbit
added
hole
that.
on YouTube.
that's a pretty good analogy. Wow, man, that's a tough question. I don't have a good answer for that right now.
You can sit on it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
Come back to it for sure.
Yeah,
Because I feel like every artist has one story. It's just hard to remember it.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes we blast through subject matter so quickly. We hop from one subject matter to another.
Right.
Sometimes we forget. But I'm sure there's something buried in there somewhere. Gotta
Right.
pull it out of my old brain.
You were going on about researching for the Spanish-American War and then the
Yeah.
Philippine.
Oh yeah.
I'm
You know what?
sitting
There is
there,
some.
I'm like,
There's some.
I even put it into the chat with us. I'm like, I feel
Yeah.
some fun facts coming right here.
Oh, there is one.
He
There
retained
is one.
something from
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. Yeah, there's some good ones. The war that broke out between the Filipinos and Americans was because of one small skirmish. It was one shot fired by an American soldier. He was apparently, I don't know, there's mixed stories from both sides, obviously, but he was intoxicated, and there was these the post area you're not supposed to be walking, and some Filipinos were walking by, and he freaked out, shot one person, and then a war broke out for 2 years.
Oh my
So
goodness.
yeah, so and prior to that, the Spanish-American War, the Battle of Manila Bay, there was just a lot of things that led to the fall of the Spanish army, and I think towards the end, the Spanish Empire started to whittle away, and yeah, it was just poor planning. Like from a military standpoint, they had gunpowder that was supposed to be allocated to mines. So if anybody tried to come into the bay, obviously, they get blown up. But they used that for something else. They were looking more of trying to bolster economy. So they used the gunpowder to blow up certain areas to construct, buildings and things like that. And so when the war broke out, they had nothing. They had no supplies. Again, yeah, I will go on about that. I better stop myself.
That's
But yeah,
actually
it was.
a
Yeah,
random
it's
fact.
it's very interesting, and it's that's one of the things. Let's see another one. Yeah, and they just didn't stand a chance. The Americans had battleships that were they were unmatched, and the Spanish still had these wooden ships with sails on them, and you're trying to fight these like metal monsters coming out of the sea. So yeah, there was a big transition at that point, a big one.
It's funny you mentioned that. That was actually something that I found super interesting about the U.S. in its early conception, when it started branching out and colonizing and things like that. Is a lot of people don't realize how strong the Navy was simply because of the resources North America had, with super dense oak, a lot of steel and things like that, iron. And it was something that the European countries weren't used to yet.
Right. That's awesome stuff, man.
Yeah. Pretty cool. Kind of makes me want to draw.
That's the idea. That's the idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the whole pirate era.
Oh my gosh, I visited Nassau. Me and my wife, we go to the Bahamas every couple of years, and every time we're down there, we go to the Pirate Museum in Nassau. If we're in Nassau, and if you've never been there, it doesn't look like much from the outside. I mean, it's Nassau, Bahamas. So you got Atlantis and all the tourist beaches and everything, and all the straw markets and stuff. It's very touristy. And if you go in a little bit, you actually get into the heart of the city and the island and everything, and away from all that. But just on the center of the city is the Museum of Pirates from the Caribbean and everything, and you go in there,
Pirates.
Awesome. It is amazing to go visit. And if you're interested in that era, I mean, they have some of them are the original flags, but a lot of them are reproductions of all the different pirates that were in the Caribbean at that time, Blackbeard and this one and that one, all hanging up. And then they also replicated a port of Nassau with an old pirate ship. So you actually walk out like you're walking into the pier, and it's hidden inside this. It looks like a little 2-story building, but it's massive on the inside. So it's almost like you're walking through like Disney World, like Pirates of the Caribbean. And
That's
you actually
cool.
go into the pirate ship and see what it was like, you know, for a pirate. And it was not like the Johnny Depp movies. I'm just telling you right now. There was nothing glamorous about that. I mean, their medical section was a dirty sheet, and just whatever tools they had available to cut whatever off, and
Jeez.
it was an absolute great time. So real quick, I just recommend, you know, go visit the pirate, you know, museum down in Nassau.
That
If you're
sounds
in the
already
neighborhood.
awesome. A pirate museum
Must.
just sounds awesome to go to.
It was cool.
So I have to mention this now because we were talking about rabbit holing. So
Sure.
a while back, I did a study of one of the concept pieces that they did for Black Sails,
Right.
and it got me thinking. I'm like, where did the Jolly Roger come from? The pirate flag.
Yep.
So I started looking into it and ended up finding out that the original the skull and crossbones, came from the Knights Templar. They actually used to fly that flag because it represented John the Baptist, his head and his 2 femur bones.
Oh, wow.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
so
that's
it
great.
was really interesting. So it became a pirate flag because when the Templars were fleeing France, because they got excommunicated and all that, they were wanted ships. So they became pirate ships.
Oh,
So
that's
it was really interesting. I was like mind blown
That's awesome.
while we were
man.
looking into this whole thing. It gave me a bigger respect for, the actual flag of the pirates.
That's cool, man. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. That's a good one right there.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
It's better than the 747.
I don't know about that. That was pretty good.
Yeah, that one was extreme.
That escalated a lot farther. But no, yeah, we'll keep it rolling. What was the next question? I don't have the show notes up right quick.
I think the next one was as far as tools, techniques, etc. Do you utilize certain brushes the most? Do you kind of go through layers, etc.? Or
Yeah. That all depends. Yeah, I do use a certain set of brushes depending on what I'm doing. Obviously, when I'm doing sketching like this, there's only like 2 or 3 brushes that I use. But if I'm doing matte paintings or set extensions, obviously I'll be using different types of brushes that are not so painterly. If my goal is to make something more realistic, then I'm probably going to stay away from certain textured brushes or marker brush type brushes. It all depends. So yeah, to answer your question about what brushes that I use and what was the second part?
the other part was just while you're creating, do you stick with one layer?
Oh, yes, the
part,
layer
or
part.
do you-
It all depends. I like to keep layers. If I'm uncertain about something, I'll keep that available. I'll keep that on a layer. So, and especially if I'm doing a project that I know that there's going to be iteration. There's certain things that are going to be iterated. I would bake that process in. But for the most part, you'll see me like on here when I'm sketching. I'll probably just keep 1 or 2 layers and then I'll start to merge them because I use a selection tool quite a bit. I don't want to keep too many layers, and the reason why, I don't know what it does to me mentally. It kind of restricts me, I guess. It gives me too many options. Good example, like George Lucas, for example, too many options, right? Okay, the original Star Wars, he had literally nothing to work with. I mean, ILM was just forming. You didn't have the tools to visualize every single thing that's coming out of your head. So you have to focus on other things, maybe storytelling or composition, or whatever. And then episode 1 comes along and there's just computers everywhere. So not saying that that's why it felt so different from the previous ones, because there was just too much visual injection. There was nothing left to the imagination. Whereas the original Star Wars, like, man, there was just so much wonder to it. And I think part of that was the happy accident of not having everything. So yeah, so keeping things limited when I'm drawing or painting forces me to still not only focus on focus on just creating, not managing layers. It helps me inject that traditional feel of painting, because when you're painting in real life, you're not necessarily using layers, although you would layer things on top of each other eventually. Those options aren't, they're not accessible like they are now.
Right. Yeah.
That's a good point. So depending on what you're working on
Yes. Yeah,
is kind of what determines how many layers you're using, what tool sets you're using,
absolutely.
brushes, etc., like that.
Hmm.
Do you work with 3D modeling a lot in your paintings, or do you kind of?
Not really. It all depends. If I'm working on a game project, there's going to be 3D assets created. Like I'll start to find assets out there. Let's say if I'm designing a level, right?
Mhm.
Depending on the stage of where the level designers are at, if they have block-in models already, they might not be like mountains or pillars or anything. They could just be simple geometry, and they place them there for a certain reason, because strategically it feels good, like they're testing it out from that standpoint. My job is to take that stuff, depending on the level of it is, in terms of fidelity, and breathe life into it. Like start to add texture, start to tell a story through that. So again, it all depends on what stage of the project is. But yeah, 3D models. I mean, again, whether you're working, depending on who you're working for, these folks aren't really necessarily paying you to draw things from what's the word I'm looking for? They don't really care how you create this stuff, in my opinion. I think they just want solutions for the designs. Now, I think some studios do. They require, obviously all studios have certain requirements, like a certain pipeline. Like if you're a concept artist, you probably should, if you're doing character design, you probably should know a little bit of ZBrush or know a lot of ZBrush. You should probably know, because you're going to be creating these characters with a lot of iteration. So having these 3D set models, although your 3D model might not be 100% accurate, it'll get you to a 60% solution, so you can paint on top of that, or even a 40%, or who knows? It could be 100 or 90%, or you're just adding finesse to it. Who knows? But it all depends on what stage you are in the conceptual development, and how far the IP has been developed. So my favorite parts are way in the beginning, when there's really nothing and we're kind of crafting ideas, like forming the story as we go along sometimes, depending on how mature the project is. So yeah, to answer your question, 3D models are an essential part, in my opinion, in today's game development environment. And I think it's going to even become even more so. So, as an environment designer, you might not necessarily need to know the fundamentals of perspective completely, because you might be able to find that solution in a 3D program that can get you a lot further. And that's the reality of it. That's the reality of this business, is you really need to embrace the tools that these studios are using, whether they go against your convention or not. It depends. Again, it's all about your goal. If you want to work for Bungie, try to figure out what they're doing, what their concept art to, what their requirements are, and that way you can craft a path for yourself. And but most likely, again, I'm rambling here. Most likely, you will encounter the need and requirement for 3D packages.
Right.
That's almost a necessity, I think.
It's actually funny the way you're putting it, because I feel like there's a lot of artists out there that look down upon like photo texturing and things like that.
Oh yeah, that's
But like you said, at the end of the day, a studio like Bungie is wanting you to put something in a design format that works quickly for them. So
right.
photos are a very fast shortcut.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree. And it's all about the tools. It's for example, Photoshop is a very powerful tool for a lot of things. And if you are in a project and your job is to visualize it, you should use that program for what it's made for. So photo manipulation, masking, things that used to be traditional at the, that are very accessible and very easy to, not very easy to do, but a lot easier to do now. Use the strengths of your program. And again, depending on what you're doing, if your economy requires you to do a certain piece of art a certain way, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's just a different approach. With my experience in concept art, it in terms of how it's executed, that doesn't really matter. If you can pull that off somehow with street chalk, I don't know. I mean, I'm just using a crazy analogy, but hey, if that works and you're able to, find those design solutions, so be it. But yeah, man, it's you use whatever tools you have and use the tools what they're made for. So if you want to do traditional art, you can simulate that digitally. And what's great about doing digital art, traditional art, in my opinion, is that hopping back and forth, you will end up becoming better at both. In the digital realm, I noticed that I can simulate things that would take me a lot longer, like mixing color theory, how I lay down, how I plot my images. That stuff translates into the digital. You can simulate that. And for a while before I went 100% digital, I was folding a digital aspect into my preliminaries. I wasn't doing sketches on paper anymore. I was doing all of that stuff digitally because the rate of iteration was so high. I can come to a quick design solution, or the design solution, a lot faster without compromising that. And now I can spend my time executing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I use the tools, figure out design, and then allocate time for execution.
That's great.
I mean, I've rambled too much.
And the amazing thing is,
like-
you say you're rambling, but if you're watching the live stream, Clinton has had on his sketch pad the entire time. So as Clinton's talking, he's creating this amazing landscape piece right here with a character silhouette, like standing on a hillside, looking over its shoulder, like looking over him to this valley with structures right there. And it's just incredible of what you're creating while you've been on here. And this has only been, it's been about an hour and a half, but it's just amazing. So if you're listening, definitely do yourself a favor and tune, find the live show of this and take a look at what Clinton's been creating this entire time.
And I can upload this stuff too. Yeah, it's that's just the way I am. I got to sketch while I'm talking. I don't know. It's kind of a.
No, Brian brought this up too. I know you've done it in the past, but are you going to be in the future doing any more tutorials?
Man, I would love to. It's just a matter of scheduling. Yeah, time. Like, I can just feel the year already piling on, and it's just a matter of. The problem with that stuff is consistency. If you're trying to do tutorials, I think being consistent is important. And I don't think I have that capability right now to be consistent. So it would be scattered, like I'd do a tutorial and probably won't be able to do another one for a few months, so for the most part, I don't even pursue it. But to answer your question, my desire to do it is there. It's definitely there. I just got to find some space, find some space to do it.
That actually brings us, that's a good segue right there into our next segment.
Sure.
Which Ruby's going to take away.
I'm going to guess. Time management?
Yes.
I was thinking the same thing.
Time management, yeah, that's a big thing. You got to take care of yourself. You can easily lose yourself doing this stuff from a health perspective, especially when you're in the zone. Like I'm sure you guys have felt that when you're doing art and you're just in this zone, man, where nothing can stop you. And next thing you know, you realize, and it's like 3-4 hours later, and you haven't even got out of your seat yet. That's happening. Yeah, exactly. So I'm trying to get better at that. Allocate more time to take care of yourself in terms of physical activity. I think that's important. So I try to set aside at least an hour, if I can, 2 hours a day, um, doing some sort of physical activity. Now I'm dealing with a lot of injuries, so a lot of it has to do with some form of physical therapy. But long story short, I injured my back, so I'm trying to deal with that. And as you can tell, the problem with having a back injury and being in business, um, can be very difficult to deal with because you're sitting down all the time.
Right.
Um, and in my case, I just recently, start to focus on tools to help with my ergonomics, and obviously the Wacom tablet that we talked about earlier is part of that. Um, Having a desk that you can raise up and stand, to get your legs going. Sitting down is the new cigarettes, I think.
Yeah.
It really is, man. Your body will you'll turn into Gollum, in my opinion. It's just you're not doing anything. You start to wither away. That's
Yep.
probably a bad analogy, but um,
It
you
makes
get
it
it though.
scarier.
Yeah, no, it's important. It's really important, to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Because this stuff will consume you if you let it.
Can I ask, how much time in a day do you dedicate to art?
Oh wow, every how much time? Execution wise, I try to not exceed 8 to 10 hours.
Not
um,
exceed is how you put it.
yeah,
That's
yeah, not
very
exceed.
interesting.
Sometimes it does, but in terms of like art itself, that never stops. Like my mind is always processing something. Like I said, remember when I was telling you like that eureka moment where perspective started to make sense to me? It really changed me. Like literally everywhere I went, I was seeing perspective grids. I was seeing all kinds of vanishing. It was nuts, man. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And again, it opened so many doors just cracking that code. So, and obviously we all can get better at it. But that was one thing that was really awesome about, understanding how things are created, how to reverse engineer images, basically using perspective philosophies. Um, but yeah, I'm like getting off track. I probably didn't answer your question, did I?
No, you did.
No, you did perfectly.
Sorry, my brain's shutting down.
It's getting a little late.
Well,
Um,
go ahead, Ruben.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, no worries, no worries.
I'm just curious too because you do art for your job as well,
Mhm.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
But then
So
you come home and you also do art.
yes, yeah. So a lot of that stuff that I post aren't really from long durations. They're kind of like tight sketches. So those sessions that you see are usually like me and winding down. So um, yeah, I'm doing sketches sometimes, and sometimes I'm not. And like I said, I'm always thinking about art. If I have an idea, there's pieces of paper scattered everywhere, like with ideas on it. Little notes, and that stuff just helps me out. Again, if it's my occupation, I want to be good at it. And
Of course.
sometimes sometimes you have to, you have to dedicate um, that kind of attention to it. And again, it becomes habitual. Sometimes you don't even think about it really, and that's where it's gotten to me in my scenario. I'm not really thinking about it. My mind is already breaking things down. Uh, but yeah, I think as being an artist, it's like back to your question, time management can be challenging. Prioritizing things because it takes time to get good at this, or at least functional at this stuff.
Here's another take on time management.
Sure.
Getting a project done, a lot of people struggle, especially with projects that are ambitious.
Mm,
And despite that, they're inspiring and you really want to move forward. Sometimes they're just too ambitious and they just don't
yeah.
get done. And usually it's due to bad time management.
Yeah, that too, and experience plays a role in that too. I mean, in terms of like being too ambitious, I think that's a good thing. Sometimes creating, having the idea of doing miraculous, or it depends on what you're talking about. Let's say, if are you talking about maybe perhaps say you want to create a video game, you know,
That's quite ambitious.
that's quite ambitious. It is, and there's a lot of facets to that, a lot of disciplines. So maybe in that sense you approach it and fail making the video game, but it's not a complete failure. It's actually, almost looking at it like a lesson. So for
That's true.
example, yeah, for example, I worked on a few personal games. We tried, a few years ago, I actually tried to form a team, and we released 2 games. Actually, they were mobile games.
Nice.
Yeah, we spent years developing it, and it didn't pan out to the way we would hope it would, but it wasn't a complete loss, because, to be honest with you, I didn't know anything about 3D really prior to that, and having that ambition to actually create a video game really pushed me and motivated me to really be structured, to be structural about it, to really allocate time and go by a schedule. And like, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to study. If it's 20 minutes a night, 15 minutes a night, as long as I'm getting some reps in, eventually it'll compound into something. And so understanding how 3D works has benefited me as a 2D artist quite dramatically, actually. So it's kind of like throwing fuel on the fire. So again, to answer your question, that ambition can be good, but to your point, it can be counterproductive as well, because I think confidence is a big part of all of this as well. Like, as an artist, you want to be confident moving forward, and it's easy. It's very easy to get down on your art because there's so much competition. We tend to gauge ourselves very oddly as artists sometimes. We look at different art out there, and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe how wonderful that is. My art's not as good as that. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Yeah.
Your art can be something completely different. So those are things, and and it happens to me too. Like, being confident about approaching your pieces has a lot to do with your progress, I think. And back to being ambitious. I know I'm going off tangents here, but ambition can fuel your skill level. What it did to me, it depends. It depends on how you what kind of person you are, I guess, too. How you approach failure, so to speak. But yeah, to answer your question, that happens to everybody, I think, on all levels.
So would you say just giving yourself a structure, like
Mhm.
putting time out specifically to try to learn something, can help
Mhm.
you overcome so that you can create and try to achieve a result that will make you happy?
Right. Is that your what?
Yeah, I was actually, I'm curious. I was curious about how you approached it.
Oh, in terms of learning something new or expanding on something, I guess it's just really setting yourself a schedule and sticking to that. I think that's really important. Um, it's easier said than done. I mean, life just takes over, obviously, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's I'm saying all this stuff, but it's just very difficult. And there's people are in different situations where those opportunities might be more accessible. So it's a challenge for everybody. Everybody
Yeah,
has
that's
different
true.
challenges.
It's unique for everybody.
It is. It really is.
Nope, that was it though. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I hope I answered that correctly.
No,
Yeah, I think you nailed it.
Everything you are saying is valuable information,
Good. That's very good. Very,
Very.
very good.
That
which is why I appreciate your rambling.
we all appreciate it. See, it's coming out in your mind, Clinton. It's coming out as rambling, but everybody is just absorbing everything you're saying. It's just so.
I hope so.
I'm taking it as very meaningful. I mean, you're bringing to light a lot of things. One thing I did want to ask, and for everybody, people that are listening and people that are watching,
Sure.
what are some techniques or suggestions you can share with people?
Techniques.
Something that might maybe one a technique that might make a certain thing a little bit easier for somebody that's like maybe aspiring or struggling with a certain area, that you might be able to put a suggestion.
Oh, can I give you a subject? Because I'm
Sure,
struggling
sure.
with this right now.
Sure.
How do you deal with multiple light sources? Like,
Multiple
what's a
light
good
sources.
technique for
Oh,
that?
that's a good one.
That is
Yeah.
that's a good question, but it's also very loaded. So I will do my best. So for light, see if I can use this as an example.
So right now, if you're listening,
Yeah,
Clinton
I'm
pulled
trying
up
to
the
the sketch that
amazing
we're doing.
art piece that he created while he's been talking, and he's going to use that as an example for multiple light sources.
Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to think of something that's more applicable to maybe to your situation. So rather than do an environment, let's do a character. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna take this dude and we're gonna bring him into a new canvas. And to the folks that aren't watching, we're gonna take a random sketch of this little guy that I drew in environment. We're gonna expand on that to kind of show and highlight how to approach multiple light sources, because they're all different. They're kind of different. With environments, it's different. When you're staging a character, that's different. So what I like to do is I like to knock out all my lights. So whether I'm bringing in a photograph or I have a sketch, my values within this guy are not very. The range isn't. I got maybe 4 to 5 values in here, just kind of smeared within each other. So now, give me 1 second here. I'm going to change his orientation real quick. Oops. Give me 1 second, because this will help. I mean, seeing this guy from the back is probably not the best solution, so we're just going to flip him. Going to kind of block some stuff in and apply a torso from the front side. Okay. So, let's complete.
I can't believe you just did that.
So let's
incredible to me.
Let's fix his let's fix his leg here. Okay, so now we're ready to start introducing light. Let me get one small detail in here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some quick facial features. Little eyes, mouth.
Essentially, what Clinton just did was he took this little half-inch back silhouette character that he drew on the hillside that I mentioned earlier, and completely just put him on its own canvas and then flipped him over and created an entire front side of him in about 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So we got this character now. So I still think this background is still too bright. I don't want that influencing me. I want to pretend like I have a completely black room. There's no light at all. And I'm going to try to simulate that as much as possible without making it completely black. Just basically, there's lights bouncing around, not any heavy one. Okay, so that. So at this point, using Photoshop, again, it's a powerful tool. What I'm going to do, and to your point about layers, I like to create a layer, a clipping mask on top of this form here. So this clipping mask, and if I simply hold Alt in between there, you'll see my icon. Oh, you won't see it on the screen. Shoot. Okay, maybe some other time we'll go through that. But basically, I'm creating a clipping mask. So I'm painting on top of this form, but no matter what I do, it's going to stay within this form. You see, I'm just kind of randomly doing that. And you guys might know that already, but for some of the folks out there, they might not know. So actually, let me back up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create, because there's several ways to approach this. I'm going to duplicate this form on top of each other. And if you're familiar with Photoshop in layers, hopefully you'll be able to follow me. So the top clone, you see this clone, I'm going to assign on my, and you can't see it through through your screen because my palettes are gone, but I'm going to assign it as a screen. Now, when I did that,
Ooh.
it made a brighter version of that, right?
Right.
So that's what I want. I'm like, that's what it's going to look like if it's lit 100%, but I don't want all of it. So I'm going to apply another mask on top where it erases it completely. And now, as opposed to using my brush, I'm going to use the eraser and then erase that light back in. Because I want that light to hit certain areas, not necessarily everything. You know, and what's great about it is that it's not like an overlay layer. I don't know if you guys are. It's like if you want to light something, a common thing to do is to create a layer and then assign it as an overlay. But what happens is when you do that, you start to manipulate the values too much. Overlay emphasizes in lights and darks. It doesn't necessarily create, you know, doesn't necessarily darken it as a whole accurately. So you might get some weird lighting effects going on. So doing it this method, I know it's a little confusing, and maybe I'll peel off and do a video that you guys can download later. But doing it this way allows you with more control with your light. So let's say that value I want to increase, I can just adjust the layers and increase that light. You see what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And that detail is still there. Obviously, to a point, if you blow it out, all that stuff's going to go. You see how it blew out? But you can still push your lights pretty bright with still retaining that information. And that's the beauty of this technique. Again, playing off the strengths of Photoshop. And you can do this in Procreate too. Those methods are very similar.
Yeah, the layer modes are available.
Yeah, so in this case, this would probably be a good time to introduce color. Like I like to introduce a lot of these things at an early stage, but I don't want to get to that point because then we'll get too sidetracked. Now, to answer your question about multiple lights, that all depends on how you want to stage it. So obviously I have a top light, or at least my main hot light coming from the top.
Right.
And now I'm starting to look at secondary lights. So depending on my background, now let's fill that out a little bit more. Depending on my background, that might influence my secondary or even third lights, or how many lights you want to put in. It doesn't matter. So let me create this quick plane here. I know I'm deviating from your schedule, but also I'll try to make this as quick.
No.
Oh, this is working.
Okay, so let's say like we have this red rock here. You know, this would be a good example of how light works too in conjunction with what we're trying to show. Let's get a nice little orange. You know.
Yeah.
So
like
maybe this landscape has these weird like, you know, crystals or something. Yeah, exactly. So, and that is right there, you know, like right next to that leg. So this is a secondary light source. This can be a secondary light source. So you will probably see some of that influence bouncing off that leg, depending on its proximity to it. You know, you might see a little bit of that. And depending on how much that color bleeds into everything else, and how bright that is, will determine it's not only its coverage but its intensity as well. So that could be a secondary light source. Now, you might have something that coming from the back. Maybe this is an environment where, you know, you have some light rays, you know, that are. I don't know if you guys can see that.
Yeah.
You know, there's a light ray coming from the back. You know, that might be hitting something. That could possibly be hitting a structure. That's also reflecting light. You know, there's all these little bounces of light that happens, and you don't need to. If you've wanted a secondary light, let's say like this environment is a little bit darker on the bottom here, and like you start to lose that leg. You know, you start to lose some of that form on the bottom. Another way you can point out or to emphasize that is to rim light it. So, you know, we have this imaginary light source that's coming from the left, and you don't have to explain that. You know, that's your job is to light that subject matter the best way, or at least the way you feel it should be lit. So, you know, there might be some subtle light there. So I use light I don't really plan it all the way in the beginning. I start with one light, and depending on how the design is going, I'll start to add lights as I go, but still try to remain within the realm of reality, to where it's not like a big disco or anything like that.
Yeah. And then I
unless
imagine,
it helps the narrative. And like, you're on a planet with just a bunch of crystals casting disco lights. That that'd be a challenging thing to visualize.
Hey,
But
it could happen.
Yeah, disco planets. That'd be interesting.
but then I imagine you have to consider the material
Yeah,
is being
absolutely.
reflected as well.
You are exactly right. So, the material that this person has can also determine how that light is reacting to those forms. So, obviously things that are reflective are probably going to be very bright. That light source is probably going to be as bright as, where it's coming from. There's not going to be any dissipation of that. Whereas if you have cloth, your values might be within this realm, but you stick within those values to imply light, because that material might not be as bright, and it might not reflect as well as that chrome, which is obvious. So, again, back to when we were talking about, values in the threes, same concept with characters. If this material is not going to reflect a lot of light, most likely those values are not going to be as bright, and you stay within there. If you have that's why when I block in things, it's very loose. I do it very far, because what I'm basically doing is I'm mixing my values, or color. If there was color in there, I'm mixing my values at a very far and very loose stage, so that I can move and craft things very quickly and make big sweeping changes if I need to. The more I drill into detail, the more concrete I get. And what happens is, if I'm not planning this stuff out, and I'm like, I got my value sets in the head, the more I detail this out, I become a slave to the values within, and a slave to the amount of detail that's going on here. That means I have to carry that out all the way through everything else. And I don't know about you, but a lot of pieces that are very compelling to look at sometimes direct your eye with a lack of detail or with detail. There's a beautiful distribution of that. So doing things from a far distance, at a small scale, addressing those things, I think will help you out in the long run when it comes to crafting something, such as a character, or an environment, or a product, whatever. Because you can see your forms better when you're looking at it far. That's why thumbnails are so powerful, because they're small and they read small. And to your point earlier about silhouettes, it's basically the same concept.
That's actually really helpful. I think the biggest takeaway right there is, like you said, working further out and then coming in, because you can kind of see the whole picture as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that to get over that hurdle, I think to paint and draw at a further distance, that's something that obviously you'll probably have to get used to, because it's not one for one. Like we talked about earlier, drawing on a tablet, or even on a piece of paper, it's already at a distance. So you're already addressing those things, or at least unconsciously addressing them. Whereas digitally, it might be difficult to do it at first, but if you keep at it, I think you can learn to predict those ratios. How we're talking about drawing a quarter inch versus, and to your point, there might be a mechanism to where that solves that problem. There's an adjustment in Wacom that I don't know about yet. So, but yeah, to answer your question, doing things at a distance, I think really helps out. Because honestly, you're just addressing composition. It's no different from an environment, but doing it from a distance, you can help see those mistakes very quickly. And keeping it loose and keeping it at a distance, you can address those mistakes very quickly. But you won't get it at the first try. Like anything, it takes practice. But I think traveling down that path, you can sharpen your skills a lot faster. Trying to break out of those molds that you have. And this might be one of them, forcing yourself not to zoom in. That could change your whole game up. You never know.
Very cool. Definitely gonna have to write those down.
And if any of you guys, Yeah, I'll be more than happy to follow up on any of this stuff. I know I said a lot of things during the session, and to folks out there that they can't see what we're doing. Hopefully, we can fill in those gaps too with a video and answer any questions anybody's got. I'll make myself available for that.
I'm gonna go back through the podcast and make notes for sure.
Awesome.
Oh, I clipped a part of it. Just so
yeah. No, there's so much information in this one.
That's good, man. I'm really glad. I'm really glad.
Well, while we're on this, and we got you sketching right here.
Mm-hmm.
How about we go ahead and do a fun 30-second challenge?
30-second challenge. All right.
Did you see Brian's spider pig?
I did, man. That was awesome.
All right, man. That is the drawing to beat right now.
I don't know if I can. That's a tall order, man.
Yeah,
that is a tall order.
So.
All right, so let me get something going here. Let me get a canvas.
All right. While he's getting a canvas, what do you got for a what do you got for a subject?
Stopwatch.
This is nerve-wracking, dude. Come on, why isn't this working? Go.
Let's think. Last one was Spider Pig. That was a good one.
Oh my God. Yeah.
He likes sci-fi.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so much in sci-fi.
So sci-fi.
Just like a little robot dude. That'd be cool.
Robot's great.
Right.
Okay. I'm down with that too, for sure.
Wait. Which one?
The robot.
Robot?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, timing.
A sci-fi robot. All right, you got to give him a heads up when it's like 15 seconds and then 10 seconds left.
Yeah. Let me get my timer here.
Ruby's got one already.
Okay.
I've got
Perfect.
one. All right. So, ready?
Yep.
3, 2, 1, go.
All right. 30-second challenge.
For those listening and anyone watching Twitch and stuff, we encourage you to also try the 30-second challenge and tag us in it so we can share what you made as well.
15 seconds left. 10 seconds.
10 seconds. Jeez.
3, 2.
This is on like my level.
30 seconds.
There you go.
He's so cute. He looks all steampunk. He's
got a top
I like the top hat.
Yeah, you got a top hat for me.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, that should be a game show.
There's an idea right there.
That is a game show, man.
We could start a YouTube show. 30-second challenges.
30-second challenges.
Yep, get 3 or 4 people. At the end, viewers get to vote.
Yeah, that's like what's that game where you draw pictures and they got to guess what it is?
Pictionary?
Pictionary. Yeah, why can't I remember that? Yeah, that's it.
For some reason, I was thinking of charades for a second. I don't know why. No, that's great.
So I'll keep this guy. That's your 15 seconds.
Yes.
Perfect. We'll put it on the Twitter channel. Share it with the world. We'll do a side-by-side between Brian's and yours.
Yeah.
Where
it can be, over time, depending on how many artists you have on here, ultimately you can build a world of these 30-second characters, So you got like Mr. Top Hat here, who's got that spider pig monkey thing, or the spider pig as a pet, or so and over time, you create this world without even knowing it. I think that'd be cool. That'd be really cool. That'd be really cool.
Like a true concept artist.
Eventually, we're gonna have a gallery.
Yeah, why not?
End of the year, December, we'll see what we got for the 30-second challenges, and then maybe we might hit somebody up to try and work all of them together, or make a calendar. I'd be down with a calendar.
That is pretty cool. I could use one.
Me too. I'm in the market for one.
I like that he's still going with it though. You know what I mean?
I know, dude.
Yeah,
He's
I
like,
can't
you know
stop this.
what? We're gonna
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah,
We're
that
gonna
is
do a side by side pose.
Yeah.
yeah. So this is what, a minute in.
About a minute and 30 seconds. You have
Right.
2 characters on there now.
Well, one less refined. I think
Now,
you know.
while you're doing that, I wanted to ask this, and you brought this up
Mhm.
a week or two ago to me, that you wanted to talk about real quick before we close out. I know we're winding down now, and this is a pretty big topic, but the difference between concept art and fan art.
Oh, I don't know about fan art more so than illustration. I think
Okay, yeah,
because I think they're kind of same. But first off, I think in terms of the differences, they're not that much different, and both of them are equally difficult, in my opinion. I think the main difference is how you approach it. So, concept art to me would represent the exploration of the parts, all the parts that make up a final product. An illustration to me would be a highlight of that product, something that you would stage that product in its best light. So it's not light using lights, but you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
presenting it in the best way possible. So where my concern is as a concept artist is understanding, for example, okay, we got this character, this awesome character in this video game, and we have this awesome illustration of this character doing something, and you see the armor has all these designs in it and all that stuff. My job is to take those shin guards and that shoulder pad and that helmet, all those little things, and explore design as much as possible to where we can come to a conclusion with me and the art director. Once those things get approved and development starts to progress, you have material to illustrate, if that makes sense. You have something that's concrete that you can take and start realizing it in a better light, because conceptual art is not all glamorous. Like most of the stuff you'll see in the studio isn't very polished work. It's very suggestive.
Like a 30-second doodle.
Like a 30-second doodle, would this communicate? If I were to say, somebody walks up, design something, and 5 minutes later, do you have something that can read? It might not be perfect, but does it read and is it functional? Those are the questions that I ask myself all the time when I'm doing concept art. So illustration would be the next stage of that, I would think. It's to take that and then to stage it better, to take all those sums and all those parts that were designed to create this character, taking that character and just essentially putting it, like I said, in its best light. So that's the best way I can describe it, really. It's just about the thought process. But a lot of the techniques are the same. The tools are the same. The level of exploration is the same. Maybe in their case, it could be an exploration of poses and composition versus me exploring design, the design pattern on that shin bone, the shin guard, or that chest plate. So those are, and then how that axe looks or how that gun looks, the little things that make up the big part. So again, I'm rambling, but
No,
that's pretty much.
and being a
how I would
concept
do it.
artist, you have to the speed that you have to work in and the accuracy is pretty intense.
I would say so. Yeah, it's, but there is a point where you end up breaking some of those barriers, man, and it becomes very liberating. Like, again, I keep referencing that moment when I started to understand perspective. I could not stop thinking about drawing things, like all the things that I had in my head as a kid. I can now realize because I can frame it now. I can plot it better. And now that in understanding the concept of research, like understanding that you can't just draw things out of your head because you don't know everything. You have to accumulate a visual library from somewhere. And, to our conversation earlier about, replicating art, that's a valid way to learn. But we're also replicating objects we see. It's no different. If I'm going to do landscapes, I'm probably going to look at mountains. I'm probably going to look at pictures of terrain and things like that.
Or perhaps it's more accurate to draw from life.
Absolutely, yeah,
Because
absolutely.
if you're drawing,
Yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry. If
No,
you're
no, no.
drawing from someone else's piece, it's worth noting that you were drawing someone else's perspective of life.
Right, exactly. So to your point, yeah, you're leveraging their like their sensibilities of how they're processing what they're seeing. So there's things to take away from that. I mean, technique is one. I think a big thing from copying or replicating somebody's work. I don't want to use the
Yes.
word copying
Well,
because
yeah.
that kind of has a bad light. But you're replicating something from it, and technique would be a big takeaway from that.
Yes.
How does this person approach snow, or how does this person approach grass? Those things. So it's not necessarily painting the grass exactly the same. But to your point, yes, going out and painting from real life, plein air paintings are awesome too. Where people are iPads are great. You can go out into the wilderness and do sketches. You will notice color a lot differently in real life than you would in a photograph. You will see a lot more reds and blues. Like I said, in shadows, there's a color party going on in shadows all the time. It's just I never really pay attention.
Color party.
That's what I view, because once you see these things, man, you're like, man, there is so much color going on in that blue, that shadow on that tree. It's like there's reds, there's yellows, there's all kinds of greens from
You're
grass.
absolutely right. You really are.
Yeah. So shadows can be, and again, I just recently discovered this. It's how much color is actually in shadows and in darkness.
Yes.
There's reds in night views. Like if you go outside, there's reds buried in those blues, and those purples that we could, we automatically think like night scenes. But there's tons of red in there too. And sometimes green, things that I would never think of unless somebody told me like, hey, look for those colors. It's like, holy crap, man, there really is color in there. So it's crazy, man.
Yeah. Got to approach everything kind of more with an open mind and looking for that detail. Like you said, you don't see these things until somebody points it out to you, or until you have a moment of like realization, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I think you have to be a little crazy to do this stuff. Yeah.
A little crazy.
You got to be a little crazy, I think. And, that sense of wonder comes with it. And again, that's why I say I never want to lose that, man, where you're seeing things and that necessarily isn't there. And having the ability to visualize those things, that's a wonderful thing, in my opinion. I think like I said, it's a great field to get into. You're getting paid to wonder,
Yeah,
and
I know it's something that I'm very passionately just in love with. I love concept art, and I love seeing these. I know it's not the raw version of it. It's more expanded and refined, and spent more time spent on it. But like the pieces that you do with the environment pieces, the ships, you've done a lot of spacecrafts and stuff. But even in Destiny, there was an artist today that we put up on the Twitter, Jeremy Fensky, works for High Moon, did a lot of concept art for the Tangled Shores and the caves in the Tangled Shores that I would have never seen before. I mean, people like Roderick Weiss doing concept pieces as well. It's just so amazing seeing these, and it just makes my imagination just go crazy and just wants me. My eye just goes. It's like candy. It really is.
Yeah.
I just love seeing that stuff.
Yeah, it's like I said, man. I love it. Obviously, I can't stop doing it. It's a wonderful thing to be in.
Yeah. Well, I know we can't thank you enough for coming on tonight and
no problem,
hanging out with us and chatting. And your 30-second challenge now looks like the most
but that's not fair.
Steampunk robot I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's not fair though. But we'll revert back to this weird, whatever this thing is.
No. Go back to the right.